If you saw my most recent video, you know that training to failure is actually pretty important for muscle growth. How do you know if you're actually pushing yourself hard enough? The good news, you probably are. Soon to be Dr. Milo Wolf here with Wolf Coaching. Today, we're actually going to talk about a topic that I've done research on myself, published research. So stick around. How accurate are people at gauging repetitions in reserve? Let me give you a quick primer on what repetitions in reserve, or RPE, is. Repetitions in reserve refers to how many more repetitions at the end of a set you could have done before failing to lift the weight. Let's say, for example, you're benching 100 kilograms. If you had perfect knowledge of the fact that you could bench 100 kilograms for 10 reps, and you did a set of 8 repetitions with 100 kilograms, that set would have had 2 repetitions in reserve. Essentially, you would subtract the actual number of repetitions performed from how many repetitions you think you could have performed, and that will give you how many repetitions in reserve you had. RPE, on the other hand, is essentially just subtracting the repetitions in reserve out of 10. So let's say, for example, you had 2 repetitions in reserve, you would have an RPE of 10 minus 2, so 8. That's all repetitions in reserve and RPE is. But since we know that training to failure, or pretty close to it, is pretty important for hypertrophy, there's a big question here. Are people actually accurate at gauging how close to failure they are? How many repetitions in reserve they ended a set with? That's what our study tried to answer. So believe it or not, there's actually been about 20 studies looking at this exact topic. With this much data, we conducted a review paper on how accurate are people at gauging repetitions in reserve. In other words, if you think you had 3 more reps in the tank at the end of your set, did you actually have 3? Or did you have 5? Or did you have 8? And what likelihood is there that you were actually quite accurate? The good news is, you're likely a lot more accurate than you think you are. A lot of clients come to me saying, I don't know how to use repetitions in reserve. I don't think I'm very accurate. I don't want to use it altogether. And I think that sometimes you absolutely might be right. However, our meta-analysis found that on average, across 20 studies, when people were asked to rate how many more reps they could have done, sometimes halfway through a set, sometimes 2/3 into a set, people were only off in their estimation by 1 rep. If you think that you could have done 1 more rep at the end of your set, you probably could have done 2 more. In other words, they underestimated the performance by 1 rep on average. Here's the interesting things. People were most accurate in sets of up to 12 repetitions. So if you're in the gym doing a set of 12 repetitions or less, in all likelihood, you're not going to be too far off, provided you're pushing yourself pretty hard. When you get above 12 repetitions, people tend to underestimate themselves by more and more. And this is where it's interesting. There is some research looking at discomfort and perceived effort during higher repetition sets, and you do consistently see that when people are doing high rep sets, they struggle a lot more. They experience more discomfort, they experience more burn, and so that's probably why it's more difficult to reach failure or to accurately estimate how close to failure you are, because as you get closer and closer to failure, your legs start burning, your arms start burning, your chest starts burning, whatever you're training, and it becomes uncomfortable, and it can be tempting to think that just because it's uncomfortable, you're closer to failure. So the takeaway here is, if you're training with below 12 reps, train about 1 rep closer to failure than you think you should. If you're training with above 12 reps, do about 3 to 5 extra reps. Here's some more takeaways. One analysis we did found that actually the training status of a participant doesn't really correlate to how well they estimate reps in reserve. In other words, whether you're a beginner or a more advanced athlete doesn't really influence how accurate you are at gauging reps in reserve. Now, there is likely a slight learning effect, at least in my anecdotal experience, of getting more trained on reps in reserve, but likely it's not a big effect. Provided you're actually pushing yourself hard enough, you will be accurate. Another thing, generally, the closer you push to failure, so let's say, for example, you're going all the way to failure versus training 5 reps in reserve, the more accurate you are at gauging how many more reps you could have done. Likewise, the heavier your working set or load you're using, the better you are. Likewise, the further you are into your session, let's say, for example, you're in the first set of bench versus you're on your 3rd set of bench. Generally, you'll be more accurate in gauging reps in reserve on your 3rd set versus your 1st one. So these are all findings that are important because they confirm that, hey, you're actually pretty accurate at gauging reps in reserve. So not only can we use reps in reserve as a means to make sure we're getting a good stimulus, we can also be pretty sure that by using this tool, we're actually pretty accurate, and it's a valid tool in prescribing training to people and making sure the stimulus they get is appropriate. The one practical recommendation I have for people who really struggle to think they have an accurate estimate of reps in reserve would be to take their last set to failure. As I discussed in this video, training to failure on at least some sets is probably a good idea for hypertrophy anyways, but by doing so, you also get a learning experience of how does one rep in reserve or failure actually feel and look like. And hopefully, over time, that will help you become slightly better at gauging reps in reserve. That's the video. If you like the video, as Omar Isafon said, like the video, comment, subscribe, and if you want to see anything else, leave a comment down below letting me know what you want to see. Oh, and we out.